Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas. Dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up, to stand up and fight back. Welcome to Speak Up. I'm Representative Kevin Avard, and I'm honored to introduce you my colleague and guest, Representative Cohn. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Seth, I wanted you to come to this show, and I wanted to talk about our last 2 years here at the House. And you know that I sit on the Redress of Grievance Committee. I was honored to see you sit on that committee on a couple of occasions. You sit also on the codification of
Constitutional review and statutory recodification, which is quite a mouthful. I used to joke that recodification does not mean we're putting fish back into the law.
Right.
And what that committee's tasked with was looking at, when we had questions, if proposed legislation would meet constitutional standards, if we should reject it just because it was unconstitutional to even go there. And then recodification, the idea there is to go through our laws and clean them up, because laws build up. It's a lot harder to get rid of a law once it's in than it is to add a new one. And
that should be done on a regular basis.
It should be, and it used to be. And the last time it was regularly done, Bill Gardner was a state rep, way back in the 70s.
Wow.
He's one of the few people who actually remembers when we had that committee. And so we were lucky. We actually got to bring him in and say, tell us what it was like back in the 70s when we were using this idea of going through the laws and getting rid of things that weren't needed anymore. And we tried to do that in the last 2 years, and what was shocking was it was almost impossible. We had very few bills where people said, let's get rid of laws. There was always a good reason why we needed this and we needed that. And I looked at the shelf of books we have that are all law books now, and I said, we've got to be able to cut some of this back. So we did a little bit, but not nearly what we need to do. I mean, this needs to be a regular, ongoing process.
I remember sitting in that committee. I was called up out of redress to go in and talk about one particular bill. It was 415, the sealed envelopes.
Absolutely.
How did that end up in that committee?
Well, that one ended up because it went to Children and Family Law. The issue was that we have cases, as you're aware, where someone there's questions raised about how they're dealing with their children, and we also have a constitution that says that people have the right to know what they're accused of, and somehow the Department of Children and Youth and Family has decided that anonymous accusations where you don't know what you're accused of are okay because we're protecting children. But it's not okay. It's unconstitutional. We have absolutely said that if you're accused, you get to know what you're accused of. We don't live in a Kafka society where you don't know what you're accused of and you're asked, well, do you plead guilty? And you don't even know what your charges are.
One of the things that we found in the Johnson's case, and it was probably the last line of the finding, where it says that the courts were guilty of the very child abuse that they were trying to protect, because of that very reason. Yes, you're trying to protect the child, but you're keeping that child away from the parent who cannot defend himself or herself with the information that was brought forth through hearsay or through a third party, put in a sealed envelope, given to a judge, supposedly, and then your child is taken away from you and you have no way of finding out. Now, that's to protect the child, but here the child is separated from their parent. And all the trauma that is going along with that. We just had Mr. Fred T-Boom on just about the Holocaust Memorial. Some chilling thoughts came to mind, Seth, because he was saying, you know what, I was a hidden child. when the Nazis came into the door, I was somebody else's child. That's my grandson or my son, and he turned over, and it was hidden because the Nazis were going to come in and take him if he were found out a Jew. But I saw, as he was saying, you know what? I was separated from my parents. It still hurts him. I can see that. And it not that we're living in Nazi Germany, but my gosh, how close are we getting to that when children can be taken away?
I think the problem, and I think this is true about more than just Children and Family Services, we unfortunately have created in many ways a society where the rights of the individual get trumped, wrongly I believe, by the state. That the state knows better. The state knows better than parents. The state knows better than the local community. The state knows better, and therefore we have passed these laws and we have set up these circumstances where you get in the wrong side of the wrong person and your life gets destroyed. And that's not right. That's not what our founding fathers wanted. They wanted government to be accountable. They wanted it to be safe and protected, not that you could be accused of a crime and not know what was going on, but that you'd be judged by a jury of your peers. I mean, they dealt with taxation without representation, and yet today we have people who say, I have no control over what my government does. I get charged the taxes and I have no say. Well, that's taxation without representation. And that's a real problem we have today. I mean, we're lucky here in New Hampshire, we have the most representative government in the country. You and I represent roughly 3,000 people. And out those 3,000 people, they can look us up in the phone book, they can email us, they can meet us in the supermarket, they see us in the community. Mm-hmm. Everywhere else in this country, they're lucky if they know who their representative is.
I think it's rather comical. I'm cleaning somebody's carpets for a living, and oh, by the way, I'm your state representative. Yet in another state, you know, they're in their high lofty offices making $80,000, $100,000, and you know what? I'm a working stiff, working in cleaning your carpets or scrubbing your floors, or there's a Dan Tamburello who's a military man, or somebody like yourself in the computer industry. We're in the thick of it, and we're representing the people.
And we answer our phones.
That's right.
And when they email us, we pay attention.
Right.
And that's the difference. And that's one of the reasons that I think the last 2 years in Concord were so different, is that for the first time in a long time, the representatives that got elected were people like you and me. They weren't the retired people who've put in their years of service and are tired and old and status quo.
In a social club.
And, exactly. And I think the large freshman group, we had a record number of Republican freshmen elected. And we came in with the idea that the status quo was not acceptable, that we were willing to sacrifice our careers and our time for the $100 a year. It's a volunteer job. I mean, we're giving up a lot to be there, and we said we were not going to do politics as usual, and we didn't. We took a stand.
You're a free stater.
I am. I'm a free stater.
Tell me about that.
I will tell you.
And talk about the media's coverage of this, because I'm getting to the point where I don't trust the media on a lot of issues. We're up there. We're seeing what's going on, and you look at the Concord Monitor or the Telegraph and you're scratching your head and you're saying, wait a minute, you know, and what is going on? We need somebody that's going to get out there and say the truth. So when people think about the free staters, they're thinking about something totally...
Well, they get a spin. I mean, I'm not just a free stater, I'm an occupier.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I'm a Tea Partier. I'm a libertarian. I'm a Republican. All of these buzzwords, people think they know what it means. And that's the problem, is that they don't know what it means. They have one view. So 2004, I moved to this state. I moved to the state because I looked at my country. I was living in Oregon at the time. And I was not happy with what I saw. And I was seriously considering leaving this country because I said, we have a problem. I mean, I remember before 9/11, before, you know, all of the bad economy, before any of this, we had a free country. And I was watching that go down the drain. And I said, okay, what's out there? And this Free State Project had just decided on New Hampshire. And I looked at New Hampshire, and the more I read about New Hampshire, the more I said, wow, what a great place. Came, checked it out, liked what I saw, liked what I heard, made the move. Now, I didn't move for specific purposes. I moved because I wanted to try to bring freedom back. And what I discovered was New Hampshire was already the most free place in the country. But there was still work to do.
Right.
And so I got involved. I ran for school board in Concord. And that's when I had my first instance of discovering what the Concord Monitor was like, because I went to the panel discussions. We had 9 people running for 3 seats on the Concord School Board. And the Concord School Board controlled a $60 million budget. And we were talking about what that money was getting spent on and the dropout rate. And the more research I did in Concord at that point, and this is before Governor Lynch got involved with changing the dropout rate in Concord over that 4-year high school period was over 10%. 1 kid out of 10 in Concord High School did not finish.
Right.
And I couldn't get the Concord Monitor to report that number. They'd say, he's concerned about the dropout rate. And there I am going door to door in Concord, which is a fairly big city. I mean, I certainly couldn't hit it. And I'm telling people, I'm concerned about the dropout rate because it's 10%. And they go, no, that can't be true. If that was true, I would have heard about it. And I'm going, they won't tell you. Right. They won't tell you the real facts, because if they knew what was really going on, people would be upset. And so the Concord Monitor reported about the fact I was a Free Stater. And they reported about the fact I was concerned about the dropout rate. And they reported that I was smart and articulate. But they did it in this backwards way where the Concord Monitor editorial said, he's smart and articulate. He's not one of those bomb-throwing anarchists. And you're going, no, what did they remember from that? The words bomb-throwing anarchist. And it was like, how you report a story is really important. And unfortunately, the Concord Monitor has a spin. The Nashua Telegraph has a spin. The Union Leader has a spin. WMUR has a spin. Everyone's got a spin. These media companies have spin because the people who run them
are corporate media.
Which brings me to the Occupy. Now, I have started describing the Free State Project from the perspective of the Occupy. The Free State Project was, we're really unhappy with this country. Let's get together in one place and stand up and do something about it. Well, that's just what the occupiers are about. We're really unhappy with what's going on in this country. Let's stand up together and do something about it.
Now,
it's not that different.
All you're hearing from the media is how that they defecate on cars and how that they're pot. It's a party.
It's not true.
But that's the media's
That's the media's spin. I've heard everyone say, well, but those occupiers, they're all out of work, unemployed, college students who are spoiled, who just want free stuff. And then I go and meet people that are working people who work 40, 50 hours a week, who are contributing members to the society, who are just unhappy with what they see going on, who are rejecting crony capitalism, who are saying, this country is not what I was promised, something's wrong.
We had them here, and we had a pretty decent discussion. It wasn't hot or heated. I mean, they came on, and it was on Speak Up. It was actually on Gate City Chronicles, another show that we sponsor. But they were polite, and some of them were working. Some of them, they retired and intelligent people. But I started asking them questions about, if the state were to come and take your child away. I mean, whoa, they were outraged. In some circumstances, they almost reminded me of Tea Partiers with long hair.
Exactly, and that is my goal. I've spent the last 2 years, I was elected as part of a Republican wave, but I was probably one of the most liberal people in the House when it came to social issues.
Right.
And so I stood up and defended same-sex marriage, and I voted pro-choice, and I mean, there are a lot of things I did that you'd go, well, he doesn't sound like a Republican, and they were right. There were times I didn't. Why? Because I was trying to find that common ground, that freedom perspective. Sometimes it sounds more Republican, sometimes it sounds more Democrat. Well, I believe that if you get the occupiers and the Tea Party and all of these people that are upset, that are saying, this is not the country I was led to believe it was, something's wrong, let's talk about what's wrong and let's start to find solutions. We're not going to agree on everything, but I think we are going to agree on the problem. And the first step to fixing anything is to agree on what the problem is. And then you start discussing solutions. And I think there are solutions that we can all agree on. For instance, transparency.
Right.
I think you and I agree, transparency in government is critical. And that's a bipartisan issue.
It is.
And we worked really hard to make more transparent government in the last 2 years.
It's supposed to be a bipartisan issue. I'm beginning to, I have my doubts. You know, people will talk transparency all day long, but you know, when push comes to shove, when you don't hold the government accountable, there's no transparency there. And you know as well as I do, sitting on the Redress of Grievance Committee, there's one side that's voting for accountability, and the other one that says, well, show me some more proof. Right. Show me some more proof. It's right in your face.
It's true. That's true. Well, and as you know, the House, we got some things passed, and what happened? The legislation would go to our state Senate. Right. And the state Senate would be the status quo. Right. Why? Because they're also working for $100 a year. But unlike you or I, to run a state Senate campaign is $100,000 a year. So who's going to pay that $100,000 a year every 2 years?
The lobbyists, which, because they're the more deliberate branch of government, obviously. I like the saying, and hopefully I've coined it, but the House, the Senate is bought, the House is not.
That's true.
And we need a House and Senate that will represent the people and that are not influenced by the money.
Exactly. And I tried to pass reforms that would put more transparency into election funding. And both sides rejected it. It wasn't the Democrats, it wasn't the Republicans, it was both of them. It was the status quo at work. And that was the problem. And we, despite the fact people like you and I were there, we were fighting the system. Well, Tea Partiers, occupiers, they're upset with the system. And the problem is they're getting told by the media, which is part of the system, that they're opposites, that they're enemies to each other.
And you're finding just the opposite.
I'm finding just the opposite. I'm finding that once people get past that initial, you're the problem, towards each other, that they go, wait, no, it's not us.
Is it the Associated Press that's saying, hey, he said this, hey, he said that, and they're all coming?
You know, I'm not going to lay the blame at any one particular group. I don't think it's any one particular reporter. I don't think it's any one particular network. I mean, I think Fox News is part of it. I think MSNBC is part of it. I think NPR is part of it. I think they're all part of a system that has just built up over time, that doesn't question itself anymore, that is in many ways manipulated by the huge amounts of money. And that's a real problem. And Citizens United, we hear, oh, Citizens United is great. It's about freedom of expression. And I'm looking and I'm going, did you know that 80% of the money that goes into the elections around this country comes from a total group of less people than will fit onto a 747? 80% of the money comes from about 300 and something people in this country. Think about that. That's not people like you and me. That really is that's not the 1%. That's not the 0.01%. That's put lots of zeros in front of that number. .006.25 or whatever it is. Something very, very small. I believe in transparency. I don't know who those 300 people are. I could probably find out, but the average person, they just know somebody else is in control of this game. And that's why they feel frustrated. They go, it doesn't matter who I vote for. You can vote for Obama. You can vote for Romney. You're going to end up with the same old thing every 4 years. And, well, try a different door this time.
Right, yeah. I recently watched the movie, Atlas Shrugged. Have you seen that movie?
Atlas Shrugged, Part 1. Part 2 is being filmed now and hopefully will be out soon.
In the influence peddling, the lobbyists and the cronyism, and these are the things that I know all of us would hate. They're almost monopolies created because of the lobbyists. Well, we're going to squeeze out the competition by making all these regulations and all these requirements and on, and that will protect our industry and from you getting into our industry, making the pool smaller and smaller who have the power.
and people end up unemployed, and people say, why isn't the system working?
Right.
And yet they also get told, oh, licensing is good for you. It's protecting you.
Right.
And so we end up with, as one of the examples we had come up this year, to become a licensed hairdresser in this state
Yes,
takes more time. You have to go to school for more hours than to fly a plane.
Spec Bowers brought that up. I was it's incredulous. It's exactly, and that is to keep out the competition.
Right. And so we end up with more people that get frustrated, that say, well, the system doesn't work. Well, I'll go and I'll get on welfare. And now we're saying, well, there's too many people on welfare. The problem just gets worse and worse. We keep feeding this problem instead of questioning the issue. So Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged. Now, she came from Russia. She saw what a real totalitarian society looked like. And so she wrote these books. And I'm not a fan of her books. You have to understand. I think that she could use an editor. They're too long. They're very speechifying. But there are days lately where you watch the news and it's straight out of one of her books. You're going, this woman was prophetic.
Right.
Because there are people out there that are almost caricatures of what we used to say. We used to have a country where people would stand up and they would stand up for themselves and they would do the right thing and we believed in this country about being up by your own bootstraps. And now we get told, well, you didn't build that.
Yeah, I know.
And that quote, there's lines in Atlas Shrugged where you're going, is that what Obama's speechwriters, are they just taking lines from that? Because it's right there.
It's funny. Talk about court reform here in New Hampshire.
Well, so, executive branch, we talked about how that's been influenced. Well, we have the judicial branch. Judicial branch is the least accountable branch we have.
Because?
What? They get elected? No, they get appointed. Once they're in, they never answer to anybody. We tried to pass some reform. We said, well, what if we amend the Constitution and say every 5 years, every 7 years, we at least look, should these people still be judges? And the answer is no. Again, the executive branch said, we're not even going to put that before the people. The system's fine. Don't worry about it. Go away.
I think Brandon Guida brought that up.
He did. He was one of many. And that's the thing is that freshman legislators who said, status quo is broken, we want to shake the system up, it's time for change. And yet, there weren't enough of us. Even though more than ever were elected, more working men and women got into the House, but the Senate was still there, and the Senate still said no, so some of those changes didn't happen. But even in the House, we were still a minority. It wasn't the Democrats versus the Republicans. It was people who wanted to shake up the system and fix what was broken versus people who said, it's fine.
I've mentioned many times before where some of the times you just see the Democrats sitting in their own little cocoon, obeying orders, and the people that were actually doing the debates were a Republican and a Republican.
Absolutely.
Time and time and time
Exactly.
again. There were floor fights, and you could just see the Democrats just folding their arms, just watching us go to battle at each other.
Absolutely.
Because we want to get rid of the establishment which says no, you can't have the freedoms that you used to enjoy, and no to transparency. And so CACR 26 is one of the things that we won on.
Absolutely.
And
put it
now,
before the people.
And it's now on the ballot. Can you tell us why that's important?
Well, so we got 2 constitutional amendments onto the ballot. One of them is to forbid an income tax. And that's one, I think people understand that issue. And so they may have an opinion one way or the other, but they're going to go to the ballot and they're going to know what that's about. 26? Most people are going to go, I don't understand what this is about. So we have to educate people. We have to explain to them. We have to show them that the court system, when the Constitution was amended to give them an extraordinary amount of power, they have abused it. And they have abused it repeatedly. This isn't a case of you can say, well, there's just a couple of cases. Those are the exceptions. You sit on redress. The more you heard about what our court system was treating individual people, and the more you heard this pattern, and the more you listen to what's going on over and over, where the courts say, don't bring the Constitution up in my courtroom. Well, isn't that what we're living under? No. When you walk into a court, you are subject to one thing and one thing only.
Case law.
court rules.
Right.
And the number one rule in court rules is we can change the rules at any moment.
Rule 1.2.
Now think about that. If you were going to go into a casino where you were going to bet everything, and they said, well, we're going to change the odds at any given moment. So if you want to bet black, all right, it's 2-1. Oh, wait, no. Now it's 3-1. Now it's 5-1. The reason you're willing to play is because the rules are there and you understand that it's fair and it's balanced. And there's a reason that the rules are there. You walk into court today and the judge can change the rules at any moment. He can say, I'm having a bad day. I don't want to hear your arguments. Doesn't matter that you have the right to them. I don't want to hear it.
And your faith in the judicial system begins to dwindle. And people are now on the edge. And we're getting emails from people that they can't take it anymore. They're being pushed to the edge. CACR 26 holds to some degree the courts accountable to the people.
It sends a message. It sends a strong message. If that passes, it won't solve everything, but it sends a message that the people are tired of the broken system and they want us to fix it.
I told you today we had a meeting with the Bar Association. The redress of grievance today with Speaker O'Brien, God bless him for creating this committee. I really am appreciative because...
Well, and to be clear, he brought it back. He didn't create it. That's one of the spins that I know is appearing right now is they're going, he made this up. No, it's in the Constitution.
It is in the Constitution.
He brought it back because under Terry Norelli and under previous administrations, the people did not have the right to hear their grievances heard, which is what the Constitution says they have the right to.
But as a formal committee this year, it's his baby, and I'm going to give him a little kudos for it. And the whole thing is we had 5 people from the Redress of Grievance Committee, plus the Speaker, for the first time that I know of, speaking with the Bar Association in a formal meeting to set up more dialogue in the future. Because after all, the lawyers and the House have somewhat of a relationship because the House is making the laws.
And the lawyers are trying to navigate the system.
Right. That does not mean that I'm advocating for a bunch of lawyers to run for the House. It just means that there needs to be dialogue.
I actually think that if we got the lawyers out of the House in many ways, and there's some good ones in there, Brendan Gaida and Bill O'Brien himself is a lawyer. I mean, there's some, but the law should be understandable by the average person.
Right.
And I can't count how many times somebody said, Seth, you really understand this. So you're a lawyer. And I go, no, I'm a computer guy, but I understand how to read this stuff. And that made all the difference. And I try to simplify it because I always said the average person needs to understand what it is we're writing. If it's so complicated you need a lawyer, we're already in dangerous territory.
You know what's really funny? Sitting on the Redress Committee, I found that whether it's the Haas's or Josh Youssef or Mr. Vandenberg, they all came, Dr. Vandenberg, they all came and they sat and they gave their testimony. And at first glance, I thought Josh Youssef was a lawyer. I mean, he knew this stuff cold. And I'm thinking, man, you went to law school? No, he's a computer guy. Haas, no, he sells computers to the schools. Vandenberg, well, he's some type of physician, has nothing. They became experts in the law without getting a degree in law.
By necessity.
By necessity.
By necessity.
They were being brutalized by the system, by the guardian ad litem, by the marital masters, by all these organizations which were not accountable to the people. And when you have full autonomy, when you consider yourself, well, I'm untouchable, I'm a judge. Okay, you know.
Men in black robes who think that they are untouchable sounds like it's out of the dark ages. It sounds like it's a different country. And that's here. And that's what's scary. And as people wake up to that, and they've woken up and said, oh, well, I'm a Republican, which means I'm a Tea Partier. Or, oh, I'm more liberal. Well, I'm going to be an occupier. Or, I'm a libertarian. Well, wait, I've heard about this thing called the Free State Project. All of these people are together on the same wavelength.
We're Americans.
Exactly.
What's your plans?
Well, I'm not running again. I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to actually get to pay my bills for a while. I'm a computer geek, and I
actually Are you a consultant?
I actually just started a new job, so I've actually got a full-time employment. I've done consulting in the past, but I wanted to make sure that I got my bills paid. personal responsibility first, obviously.
Right.
And I'm going to stay involved, and I'm going to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the state. I'm, as I said, trying to bring together the occupiers, the Tea Partiers, and that's my goal. I want that common ground. I want people to say it's not left versus right, it's us versus the problems.
Right.
And that's a huge, huge thing to do.
Well, I'm sure you will still be seeing your face at the Capitol.
Absolutely. You will see me all over the place.
Right.
And I'm writing essays and going on TV shows. And people can certainly say, oh, yeah, Seth, he's going to go ahead and he's going to challenge the status quo. And I won't have to be a representative for that.
Well, you're welcome to come on, speak up at any time. Speak up with an occupier, with yourself, or with any issues that you have. This show is for people to speak up and be heard. I mean, I don't have to necessarily agree with them, but if they feel as though they're talking to a deaf wall, that's what this show's about.
Absolutely.
Obviously, let their facts be correct, but...
we were talking about this. There are 4 boxes that protect our freedoms, and those 4 boxes should be used in a certain order. And the first box is the soapbox. People should be able to speak freely. The second box is the ballot box. They should be voting for more freedom.
Right.
The third box is the jury box, because when you're a juror, you have that sacred ability to say this person broke the law or didn't break the law, or maybe they broke the law, but it's understandable why, because the law is a bad law. And that's the jury box. And then finally, the box we should be using the least, which is the ammo box. If it gets to the point where someone is using a weapon, we've failed.
Right.
And that's my biggest problem. I wrote an editorial that was in the Union Leader that said, taking the occupiers and stopping them from doing their protests, stopping them from assembling. The right of assembly is a fundamental constitutional right, and we pushed them aside. In Manchester, they said, there's a curfew. You have to leave. You can go any place, but you can't stay here. We don't want to hear the message you're saying. And the occupiers said, but we have a right to be here. Right, schmite. Curfew, sorry, go away. And they shut down what was political expression. And my editorial said, we can't keep doing that. We are going to end up with a revolution. You think the Arab Spring was a revolution? Where do you see the New Hampshire fall?
Well, let's try to avoid that. Let's give people a voice, and thank you very much for coming on this show. If you want to have your website out there, or do you have a website?
Well, people can go ahead and Google me, SethCohn.com, C-O-H-N, and I'm all over the place.
Is there a book in the near future for you?
Well, I've written a bunch of stuff, as you know. Periodically, I would just write a long essay, and I'd have reps from all sides say, wow, that was really great. And so I'm going to try to compile those, and at some point I'll put something out there. But, political writing is a little dry. I just think getting our message out there. So I'm a big person that basically believes coming on and talking to people is the right way to do it.
Well, maybe you can talk about some of the highlights of the house and some of the fun times we've had there.
Absolutely. So, 2 years before the well.
That's right.
And hopefully you'll have a few more years. So
I'm running again, so let's hope and keep our fingers crossed. So until next week, I want to thank Representative Seth Cohn. You're still our representative, and we really appreciate everything that you've done at the House and for your service and your continual activism in making this a free state.
Well, thank you.
All right, Seth. All right. And thanks for joining us for Speak Up. If you have any questions, please give us a call or write me at Speak Up NH, or Speak Up and Be Heard, I should say. Speak Up and Be Heard at 68 Bartimus Trail, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03063. And if you want to support this show, please, by all means. Until next week. Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas. Dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up. to stand up and fight back.